So I recorded all of these fights in off-season, which anyone who plays competitive war knows is normally a time for taking things extremely casually. You don't boost. You might do duels, but probably not a lot. And you test things that either you want that fight to go better than it did last time, or you want to see if it could work next time, maybe better than what you've been doing. So my main goals were to continue to find places where I could use Tigra beyond where I already knew she worked, and to find places to use Mr. Fantastic for more than his pre-fights. I've talked about that a bit before. This first fight is a total nothing burger. I would have taken like no damage at all if I hadn't accidentally had him trigger route, but it was still one more fight that she can easily do, and you don't have to think about assigning anyone else. This next one, I'm actually kind of annoyed with myself that I hadn't thought of this sooner, and I'm sure a lot of you have, but it's just the fact that nodes like Rage, where the problematic aspect of it is something that triggers a buff, just gets completely turned off by her neutralize. Because it's a buff that triggers on hit, right? Now, if I had been taking this in war, I would have dueled better. I wouldn't have missed that heavy counter, and I wouldn't have gotten hit. But you can see what I usually call fights like this as proof of concept here, which is just she's doing plenty of damage without worrying about the cap from Rage, and she hasn't triggered a single Fury because she just can't because of that neutralize. And we get that first L2 off, and even though this is a node with a damage cap, and it's somebody tanky like Emma Frost, she's just going right down. Because Emma's immune to a lot of debuffs, but not to Rupture, even in Diamond form. And this is the easiest Rage fight I've ever taken, personally. So, if this works out in season, I'm definitely doing this again. This was a real eye-opener for me. So next up we have a fight I'm not taking from full because somebody else tried it before I woke up. Like we said, we don't take off-season that seriously, as you can tell by the KO'd champion on my team. However, I wanted to try her here, where you can't just start by baiting a heavy because of that unstoppable. You could if you brought Black Panther, but I didn't want to rely on that. And so what we're seeing here, you see that Rupture the first time the Unstoppable fails to trigger, but I'm mostly finding my intercepts when he doesn't have the neutralized up using step backs, same as with Claire. Now, I can cause those specials to miss and then counter them, but I'm not 100% sure of the spacing yet, so I just dodged it for now so I didn't have to worry about intercepting with a heavy, and built to the L2 anyway. I mean, you saw how fast that was. She gains so much power on Polka Dot Power, because every stack of Rupture is a damaging debuff. So next we're moving on to the Reed fights. My default with pretty much anything is Petrify and Suppression. There are reasons to use Debuff Siphoner, but it didn't really come into play here. This node sometimes causes people problems because the Furies can stack up. I've always said that that shouldn't really be an issue if you just play the node, or you can go the other way and bring someone like Thing. But often people will place defenders here that try and interrupt your ability to, quote, play the node. Obviously this defender has suicides, that's doing a good half of my work for me, if not more. And the extra debuffs are increasing Reed's damage, so I don't want to minimize that. However, notice just how much control you get just from that 40% Petrify. Symbiote Supreme might as well not have specials, really. And even when he gets that power gain, it doesn't do a lot. I'm not able to build to the L2 in this particular fight, but it doesn't matter. And you saw that the evade came in handy there too, because I didn't time that parry perfectly, so it just backed me out of the way. That's not something you rely on, but it's one more damage mitigation feature. This next node is the Power Snack Mini that all of Tier 1 feeds into. This can cause some problems. We often take it with Torch or something else because Mystics are common here. But I've had a suspicion for a while that Reed would do really, really well, especially with both Petrify and Suppression, and so this was my first chance to test it. I will say, note how I had to back out to get the pre-fights to apply properly. That's something you're going to want to be careful of. Also, you'll see that, again, because this was off-season and I didn't do my duels, full disclosure, I am missing some of those parries. That's something that could be easily fixed in a more serious war. I also am not doing what I would probably normally do by evading that special one and then dashing in and dashing away. That was just because I didn't have the second Petrify up yet, and I didn't want to give him too much power. Between Power Snack and Mystic Dispersion, it just wasn't worth it. Now that I have two up, it's a lot easier. Also notice just how slowly he's gaining power from my regular hits, because we now have two suppressions up. That cuts his combat power rate fully in half on this node. As long as I keep hitting him while he's stunned and keep the karma under control, he just does not gain a lot of power. That last instance of Power Snack also was cut down to 20% of it is. Notice how when backup recovery triggers here, he actually loses power because we have all three petrifies up. So it had minus 120% to power gain effects, which means it was actually negative 20%. So as long as I reapply those, I can now see trigger power gain from the Power Snack, and again his power goes down. Now, these debuffs do stack at 3, so I didn't need to use this last L2. I think the smarter move actually would have been to start using L1s to keep the number of unique debuffs up and get us more pre-fights for the future. But you can see just how completely Reed shut down this fight. Longshot barely got any specials, despite being a Mystic with Power Snack. I have not yet tested this against Dr. Doom, who's one of the most common placements here, and I would not recommend it against Man-Thing even with the debuff Siphoner, which would mostly control the poison. But I do think that he would completely shut down Doom the same way, because Petrify turns off that aura, and the suppression really makes a big difference. When I've fought Doom with him before, I have easily ended fights before Doom gets more than 2 or 3 specials by following that exact playbook. And the only difference that I think would make it harder is Doom has block penetration, so I would have ended at a bit lower health. But that's easily solved with a potion, and I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be taking my Reed off defense and bringing him to war this season, just based on how incredibly these test fights went, especially the Power Snack one. If there's anybody out there who was still doubting Reed, hopefully this at least made you start to reconsider it. Alright, see you next time, guys.